The situation in the Middle East is of particular concern because it seems that the United States is moving a lot of, let's say, weapons, fighter jets, and aerial tankers to the Middle East, the same sort of movement that we've seen before the war between Iran and Israel happening, 12 days of war. And many people are concerned about what's going on in the Middle East, particularly those people who voted for Donald Trump, like Tucker Carlson and the late, Charlie Kirk was so much concern in the first place when they wanted to attack Iran. And here is what Tucker Carlson yesterday had a podcast with Jeffrey Sachs. But before Jeffrey Sachs coming up, he mentioned something new that we didn't know about it during the 12 days of war with Iran and Israelis and their behavior in Washington. Here is what Tucker Carlson said.
War, such as it was with Iran, the U.S. and Israel versus Iran, bombing on all sides. During that short conflict, IDF officers in the Pentagon, foreign military officers in the Pentagon, and by the way, they're not the only foreign military officers in the Pentagon, to be clear. There are NATO officers, they're from other countries, British, but there are a bunch of Israeli Defense Force officers in the Pentagon that week. And during that week, ask anyone who works at the Pentagon, they enraged American Pentagon staff by just barging into meetings, giving orders, making demands, and nobody did anything about it. How can a foreign military officer barge into military headquarters, even if invited, but barge into a meeting and start demanding, we want this, we want that, you need to get on this? Huh? The more you allow that kind of deeply unhealthy behavior, the more you're going to get. And that's exactly what has happened. Because of the weakness of our leaders, we have incited predators in a foreign country to take advantage of us. Oh, that's such an anti-Israel thing. It's not anti-Israel at all. It's a demand that the people whose job it is, whose sacred duty it is to defend and represent us, our leaders, both at the Pentagon and all throughout the U.S. government, that they do that they stand up and defend us against all potential threats, against all foreign countries to the extent they need to, and that they do not prostrate themselves before a foreign nation. That's just basic. Why have a government, especially a strong government, if it's taking orders from another weaker government? And that is the state of play. And it has been for a very long time. And they're not even pretending.
Yeah, they're not even pretending. Alex, what's your take on what's going on in the Middle East? Do you think that we're going to have a second war between Iran and Israel, which I would believe if that happens, the United States would participate since the beginning of the war?
I don't see how Trump can avoid participating in this war if Israel launches it. And it does look like Israel will launch it. It's just a question of time, and it's probably due fairly soon. I think that it's going to be extremely dangerous for the United States to do this. And I think that the very fact that we hear so much about this now, that we hear so much about the Israeli role in the United States, but especially from people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and so forth, people who are not part of the administration, but who are allies of Donald Trump and his government, tells me that there's a great resentment towards Israeli influence in U.S. foreign policy. And I think that this is part of all these revelations that followed Charlie Kirk's assassination for the United States, for the American people, to become aware the ways in which the American government and the American military are being manipulated by foreign force to carry water for them, to fight their wars. And ultimately, I think that if the war can be avoided, that it's kind of a preparation for shifting the blame from Trump administration to the Israelis. I don't have a better explanation for that, because it seems to me that if the United States went full on into a broader war in the Middle East on the Israeli side, that they can gain nothing other than a humiliating defeat, because we know that the Iranians have the power to destroy all their 22 military bases in the Middle East. That they can probably sink some of their ships, if not all of their ships in the region, whatever is within reach. We also know that Iran is probably even more powerful today than it was last summer during the 12-day war, because they've already received new armaments and new equipment from China and from Russia. We've seen voices from places like Pakistan and Egypt grow louder, and from Turkey, that, okay, enough is enough. They're ready to even put troops on the ground and intervene in Israel to stop the genocide of the Palestinian people. So, triggering this kind of a war is nothing short of suicidal for Israel. It's going to be extremely bruising for the United States if they can't extricate themselves from the situation. And I think that at that point, Trump administration will have to have a culprit. And I think that they're setting up Israel to be the culprit, rightly so. But I don't have a better explanation, because the whole thing, I understand where Israel is coming from. I understand why they would want to attack Iran. I understand why the British are supporting Israel in all of these endeavors from the shadows. Nobody's talking about the British role, but they're extremely active, and I would say that they are maybe even the instigator of all these conflicts in the Middle East. But for the United States, it's almost like a political suicide for Trump, who, his main battleground at the moment is the political battleground at home, with the view of winning midterm elections next year. A defeat in the Middle East could be one of those irreversible moments that would bury his administration. But at the same time, he has the American Congress, which is owned and controlled by Benjamin Netanyahu. There's this very large segment of his voting public who are Israeli Zionists, Jewish Zionists, and Christian evangelicals, who are a very, very large committed force in among the U.S. electorate. And these are the forces that are practically forcing Trump's hand. And I think that this is also the reason why we had this unprecedented meeting of all the generals and admirals in the U.S. military, where it was such a bizarre event, but the theme that seems to kind of undergird the whole thing is, as Pete Hegseth said, well, if you don't like what I'm hearing, you should resign then, which is a very, very abrasive thing to tell your military brass. And then Trump, on his way there, just gave a flippant remark: if I don't like the look of somebody there, I'm just going to fire them on the spot. It's not exactly those words, but it's very, very close. Trump has always been extremely careful to be supportive of the U.S. military, to have a good relationship with the U.S. military. So the fact that he's taken this confrontational stance tells me that maybe purges are in the works, that he may have to conduct a large-scale purge of the military brass to make sure that they don't turn against him. And this is not unprecedented either. During the Civil War in 1660s, Abraham Lincoln was forced. Well, he purged the American military and political class by imprisoning anything between 14,000 and 38,000 people, because in the middle of the Civil War, his government was also infiltrated by British interests, by Southern interests, French interests, and so forth. And to protect his presidency, he had to eliminate them all. So I kind of wonder aloud here if this very strange event that just took place with the gathering of all the generals and admirals in U.S. military wasn't an announcement of something like this starting to happen.
Alex, looking at the behavior of the United States, you mentioned the role of the British government, British intelligence, British elite in the United States, but how do you evaluate the United States as an empire? Do you think they're losing their connection to the reality of what's going on in the Middle East? That's why because after all, it's Donald Trump, the one who has to decide about if the United States goes to war in the Middle East or not. And so what's going on with him and his administration? Because this guy is totally different. It's totally different from what we've seen before the election.
Yeah, you're right, and I can't say. I don't really know. When the Trump in his electoral campaign, even Trump in his first term, was very much America first guy, very much wanting to extricate the United States from its imperial commitment around the world, wanting to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria, from Afghanistan, even from Germany. And he started off that way. But it seems that something about his rhetoric has changed since his state visit to the United Kingdom. And so the question is, did he change his mind? Did someone somehow get to him and force him to change his mind and to revert into the globalist camp? Or are we witnessing some kind of a grand deception where he's going to draw them in, not in order to serve them, but in order to behead them, politically speaking? It's very hard to say. We are looking at political processes that eclipse our temporal scale. The narrative cycle is going from day to day, from week to week, month to month, and so on. And we can see events. Ukraine war starts, it goes on, it's nearing its end. But we're looking at something like the fall of the Western Empire, which, if you compare it to the fall of the Roman Empire, that thing has spanned more than 200 years. And even before the Roman Empire was beginning to fall, they had a rival in the Mediterranean, which was Carthage. And the Romans were about as obsessed with destroying Carthage as the Western Empire today is obsessed with destroying Russia. And it took them 100 years to destroy Carthage. There were 3 Punic Wars. And after every war, they had to set up the stage for the next war. It didn't happen all at once. And they finally destroyed Carthage only in the 3rd Punic War. And today, I'm careful to call this the Western Empire because, no nation is a monolith, and the United States is not a monolith either. So I'm not really comfortable calling it an American empire, because I think that the empire's headquarters and roots draw always to the City of London. And the City of London has been able to co-opt and infiltrate the United States over the last 100 years, but especially in the aftermath of World War II. And so they've been able to use the United States, its military power, its economic power, its finances, its political prestige and diplomatic reach around the world to carry water for this Western empire. But they've had opposition, and they have opposition because there's many people in the United States, people who are near the centers of power and who are in the Pentagon, in the US military, and in the American political class, who are very opposed to this empire and who have been looking for ways to get the United States out, to return it to its republican roots, because the United States became a nation as a reaction to this, as a rejection of the British Empire. And so those forces are still there. They exist, they're viable, but the fight at home is not going to be easy, and it probably is going to require Donald Trump to completely solidify his power at home, which means we probably won't get the full measure of the man until after the midterm elections. And then I think that he will have to go authoritarian, because all those, quote unquote, democratic structures of governance in the United States, including the judiciary, have all been rigged to keep the United States co-opted and infiltrated, and to make sure that it never bends from the imperial agendas. So it's very, very hard to say, and I think we probably won't know for sure until the end of his term, really.